Godzilla versus Kong from 2021. We have finally made it to the end of the road to Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. That movie comes out on Thursday, and that review is forthcoming. But to close things out, I had to invite the, I don't want to call him the other third, but one of the one-thirds of small talk. I've had Jacob Collins on here, but now it's this guy's turn. It's Matt Wyatt. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to get into Godzilla versus Kong. Dude, this week, yeah, Godzilla X Kong's coming out. Like, we're literally right around the corner.
Yeah, I remember in regards to Godzilla versus Kong, there was like it was like the pandemic was like just like it was like not exactly like it wasn't over. I don't want to say it was over, but it was like
Yeah.
theaters were slowly starting to like dip their toe back out into the maybe we can open again because there was like a time in I think August or September of 2020 where they opened up briefly, but then they closed again. I know because I saw this very weird Russell Crowe movie called Unhinged.
Do you
It wasn't
remember, do you remember when Russell Crowe promoted that movie and how dark he was in that, in that promo when the
it
theaters were starting to reopen? I remember because I had never saw Unhinged. I skipped it. The first movie that came back in the theaters when they did re-releasing these old classic films, and it was The Empire Strikes Back. But then the newer releases, it was the New Mutants and then Tenet, and that was the last time that I saw it at the time when they were reopening and they were closing it again when they shut down the theater.
honestly Tenet is a very memorable theater experience for me, but that's a discussion for a whole nother time. And New Mutants, well, let's
Never talk about it.
yeah, let's never talk about that. But the point that I am trying to get at with period at the end of the sentence, Godzilla versus Kong was the first big movie to really come out into theaters in like this came out in March 24th of 2021. So we were starting to like it was like a whole like come out wherever you are, like that scene in The Wizard of Oz, whereas like slowly working our way back to normal. Like WrestleMania had just been announced as they were doing Raymond James Stadium in limited capacity. So nature was healing, as the saying goes. But Godzilla versus Kong was the first one to go, all right, we're back. And the movie made about $470 million. So it did very well for itself. Before we get into this particular movie, though, Matt, I wanted to ask you, I find the MonsterVerse, as it's called, to be pretty enjoyable as a whole, but what do you think of the series just in general?
Well, honestly, the movies have not been great, but the only thing that became the savior is the monster mayhem. That's what we've always wanted to see. We kind of knew what we were getting ourselves into. I mean, it was starting from 2014's Godzilla, which was pretty much almost 10 years ago. Oh my God, how crazy that was back then. When Gareth Edwards was at the helm of directing that film and they took it very seriously, it became more grounded and real. And they marketed with Bryan Cranston being the protagonist of the movie until he was killed in the first hour of the film and never see him again. And then we're left alone with Aaron Taylor Johnson and I forgot what was her name. What was the actress name that played
The
the wife? Oh God. Yeah,
Elizabeth
Elizabeth
Olsen.
Olsen. Yeah, now I remember. Yeah, Quicksilver and Wanda. Yeah, how crazy that would have been. Their two couple, and then they were in the MCU together. But it just felt so bland and boring. And you cut him off, cut Godzilla off screen every time he shows up, and you only get to deliver a good finale at the very end. But then when we get into Godzilla King of the Monsters and Kong Skull Island, they understand that they want to just see some monster fights, and then you don't really give a shit about the humans. And that's what I felt like we knew what we were getting ourselves into. We're just waiting for the anticipation of Godzilla and Kong duking it out. They've been planting the seed since at the end of the post-credit scene of Kong Skull Island. And then they teased it a little Easter egg in the middle of a King of the Monsters. And that's what we've been waiting for. And then because like you brought up before that this was slowly getting this back into the theater. And this was around the time when HBO Max and Warner Brothers were doing a day-to-day release to streaming at the same day during theaters, during streaming on HBO Max, which was one of the dumbest things that they have ever done. But they were under contract throughout the whole year, and this was around. I believe this was like around the time when after Mortal Kombat reboot came out at the time, if I remember correctly. But I
Yeah,
will say that I was entertained by this movie, but as a film itself, it's not that great. The human characters were terrible.
yeah, we'll get into that in a minute, but I just I wanted to point out, like, I remember that time so vividly because I remember Dune Part 1 came out day and day release in theaters, and on HBO Max. And with all due respect to HBO Max, I have it. It's a very good service. I don't mean this as a dig, but there was no damn way I was seeing Dune Part 1 in like my TV right here. When there's a theater,
Unless if the movie's got bad reception, then we'll say, okay, we'll watch it on streaming.
that's what I did for Mortal Kombat. Like I'm not
I only did that for Wonder Woman 84, and then I did that for Matrix Resurrection and Space Jam 2.
funny thing. I did do that for Space Jam 2. That was a waste of time, but
Thank God I skipped at the theater. I was like, whew, dodged that bullet.
Algae, Algae Rhythm, folks. That was your villain's name.
But I do agree that I was never gonna see Doom Part One at stream on at home. I was definitely gonna watch this in IMAX, and I thank God I did.
Yeah, because if Dune Part Two's box office numbers have shown us anything, it's that it was not made to be watched on like home TVs. No
It
offense.
got lucky. One of the movies like Doom Part One or Mortal Kombat or Godzilla versus Kong, they were lucky enough to make money and they were able to break even when it was on day-to-day streaming. But it would have made a lot more money if more people just went go straight to the theater experience. And it was slowly getting back into the theater. People were willing to come back and experience it for the first time in a long time because we had social distancing in the theater. I
Mhm.
remember at the time when they were opening, we were had to keep our mask on unless we were eating popcorn and beverages.
Yeah, I remember that too. That happened in my theater as well. And on it, and the thing is that I remember there was actually an AMC about 20 minutes away from me that never closed. I'm
Really.
surprised that they were able to get away with that, but
They didn't close because where I used to live, there was two theaters I used to go to, like Marcus or AMC. They boarded up those those windows, everything during the pandemic when the theaters shut down. And every time I go by there, it felt like I was in a ghost town. Like, oh my God, the theater is about to die. It was like a big fever dream that I never thought I was gonna wake up to.
it's like the opening because my theater like it's in Florida, so like everything's hot and wet and it grows really big, the plants that
Right.
is. And
That
I
yeah, I've been there.
and the grass that was by the theater had like started to take over like the tiles in front of the theater, and I was thinking to myself, this is the opening of I Am Legend with Will Smith.
You're not far off on that one. I mean, it almost felt like I Am Legend for a moment. We were feel like we were living in it, and it was like, is this going to continue? Thank God, it felt like we were waking up from a nightmare.
Yeah, it's 4 years ago now. It's like so just honestly, we could do a whole nother like video on this channel talking
But
about
dude,
like
my home, I literally had to literally make my own little mini home theater style, just so I
yeah.
can still have the experience. Even though at the time I thought that the theater was probably never that we were probably going to never see the light of day, and this is all we were going to have.
And to think I did the AFI project under pandemic rules and I had to go to the library and they had to like lift the movies into my trunk like hostage style and then be like, put the movies in the trunk. But let's
Let's go.
we are seriously burying the lead though, but I am putting a pin and we're gonna do something. Maybe we'll get Collins in on this too, like pandemic theater experiences. I'm going to hold myself.
There's literally a YouTube video when they made fun of the theater with AMC, but like spoof, where it was like, yeah, we're gonna have a popcorn and make you feel like you're in the theater because this is all we got.
Pretty much.
That was like spot on with the way they did that video.
But that'll be something for the future. Let's get into Godzilla versus Kong proper. And this movie picks up a few years after the events of Godzilla King of the Monsters. King Ghidorah is dead, and, well, to make the long story short, Godzilla and Kong fight. And then Mechagodzilla somehow enters the picture and like you were alluding to, Matt, the story is like they could literally have been playing chess. Like they literally could have just been like
Exactly.
over Rook, and literally no one would have cared because if as long as they were punching each other, everyone was just like, "This is nice. I
Like no
like
matter how many plot holes they throw into this movie, makes no
it."
sense. As long as the Lord and Savior, Godzilla and Kong, we want to see them duke it out. That's all they came to see.
Yeah, and on top of that, well, getting into some positives, I do like the look of both Godzilla and Kong just in general in this universe. I love their looks, and when they do fight, which does happen quite a few times, it's fantastic overall. They introduced the whole Hollow Earth thing, which was very much alluded to in King of the Monsters, but I
They have light source on that hollow earth. They're at the center of the earth, so how do they still have light there? No, don't
yeah,
worry about it.
it feels like window dressing is just being added on just for the sake of we need like it feels like Roland Emmerich would have directed this in the mid 90s
That would,
almost.
yeah, that does. You're spot on that one, especially when now we know the history that Godzilla's kind and Kong's kind, they've been at war for centuries, so they wanted to build a history around that shit for them to have them duke it out and make the fight scene even more interesting. But even when they went into Hollow Earth, the humans are not wearing radiation suit. Didn't this last scientist went to the center of the Earth to resurrect Godzilla, and it's radioactive, and that you can actually die if you take your radiation suit off? And the humans are just hanging out, and they have no problem. They're just walking like nothing's happening.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's at the Earth's core. And I am no scientist, but it's pretty hot down there. Like I
It's
live in
super
Florida,
hot.
so I know hot things. So like sitting there thinking to myself, they should be sitting like in that big old like The Incredibles, Jacob the or
Right.
Matt, the movie The Incredibles, where
Yeah.
like Syndrome and them enter through the wall of fire. Like
Hmm.
that might as well be the Hollow Earth. But no, it's like Jurassic Park in this piece or something.
It might as well be Jurassic Park meets fucking Planet of the Apes style, which that's what Godzilla X Con's gonna look like a fucking Planet of the Apes on steroids.
Pretty much, yeah. And kind of tying into that, they introduce a character who is a conspiracy theorist podcaster.
Oh
No,
boy.
these filmmakers don't spend all day on Twitter. Why do you ask? But,
Also,
but
the Brian, the podcast dude who works at the Apex, who's been undercover-ish, he's has his own podcast for the public to hear, and he's literally giving every information to every movie he's gonna make, and no boss or security guards are gonna be after his ass. But no, they don't have competent security because that's what's gonna slow down the movie.
literally, like anyone in this company downloads Spotify or Apple or like Google Play, and they find this and be like, "Hey, does this guy look familiar to you?" And I'm like,
Does his voice sound familiar? He doesn't make his voice anonymous. He doesn't do a voice changer like, "Hey, what's all right with our podcast going?" Oh, it's like, come on, dude. Like, you think no one's gonna recognize your voice?
yeah, like distort your voice. That's my thing. But it
Yeah, but
just
we're following with Millie Bobby Brown, who is back from the last movie. She teams up with this one kid from Deadpool 2, which I don't know what his background is, but he's joining for the ride. They're going on a little bit of a Scooby-Doo hunt with the Apex, trying to expose them for what they're doing to Godzilla and what they're up to, and why that they're provoking him in the first place, and why that Godzilla is destroying the Apex facility, killing many innocent people, really, if you think about it. Is he really the hero? Because he's been killing a lot of people.
the kid from Deadpool in question is Julian Dennison, who was in one of Taika Waititi's films, Hunt for the Wilder People, and of
Yep.
course he was in Deadpool too. So he's been around, let's just say. And Alexander Skarsgård is also in the movie. Nice to see him always. Rebecca Hall, always nice to see her always. And I like the angle they go with of like her having like I guess her daughter question mark oh like an adopted daughter who ends up is deaf and she needs to communicate through
Yeah,
sign language.
she was part of the native from Skull Island that her family died in the storm. Even the rest of the tribe died in the storm. She was taken in as Rebecca Har's ward and took her in and raised her. And they somehow she was able to teach Kong sign language with no adult supervision around in that facility, that around that dome. And also, how the hell did they be able to carry Kong in the fucking facility of the dome? How the hell did that happen? He's a
I
giant
mean,
motherfucker, and how they managed to carry him around,
at least
especially
in
on a submarine. He's laying on the submarine, and none of them sunk the damn fucking ship. And then they carry him in a multiple chopper on a net. How are they able to strong enough to have that strength to lift that fucker?
I mean, at least the Toho King Kong versus Godzilla showed that like they carried him barely on like helicopters. So I wanted to Google this. How much does King Kong weigh?
I mean, he's much bigger in this one than in his other iterations because they wanted to be on the same playing field with Godzilla.
So according to his fandom page, he weighs 30 tons.
Jesus.
So, so he's a big boy riding on a submarine like it's a surfboard.
Might as well be a surfboard.
But it clearly this is a movie where if you look too deep into it, you're just gonna be like, what does that mean? Like you
Don't think of the writers are like, don't think of anything logic. Don't worry about it. Get off my back about it, dude.
to kind of tie back into Sean Chandler, this is very much a Taco Bell movie. You don't want to think too much about what's going in, but you just know it tastes good.
How ironic, because I just literally had Taco Bell not that long ago, earlier today. Thanks for the analogy.
You're welcome. But like like I said, this movie is fun. I don't want to like make it sound like we're trying to like trash the movie or anything. I don't think that's our intention, but I
But we're gonna be vocal about it.
yeah, it's interesting to think with COVID like loosening but not totally leaving yet. It'd be interesting if this movie had made more money, like because it made 470 million, so that's not a small amount. Like, do you think it would
No.
have cracked a billion?
I don't think it would have cracked a billion. I think it would have made it at like how much did the last film did? King of the Monsters? I can't remember. Like,
Let
did it make
me,
like 700 or something?
according to Wikipedia, it made 387 million. So
Wow. Wow,
smaller than I've
it
seen.
made I think it would have made it into the $600 million range if it were to be released only in theaters. I think it would have made it like 600 at least.
But Warner Brothers, like everyone, basically had to like make things up as they were going along. It was literally like, whose line is it anyway? But if you got too close to someone, you were probably sort of kind of gonna get sick. So it was like just,
Yeah.
and the points didn't matter.
The points don't matter.
But I think just in general, this movie's very enjoyable when it like gets to the meat of the matter of like Godzilla versus Kong pointing at each other and saying, "Let's be having you." And the rest of the time, like I said, you could have literally just replaced it with like just slideshows of people making cake and no one would have cared. And, like as long as Godzilla
No.
and Kong do this, we're satisfied.
At least the fist bumping, that's all that matters. And also the Mega Godzilla was pretty dope to watch. I mean, even though it was kind of stupid, but but the CEO, who is supposed to be the villain, but he makes a good point why he needs to make that suit to protect the human race from being killed by the Titans, which that's kind of reasonable, but they kind of make him more of a twirly mustache obvious villain.
Yeah, the thing about Mechagodzilla is that he's basically like he's been a villain in the Toho movies, but he's also more often than not been the good guy. Like basically, I see him as kind of like Guillermo del Toro saw this and thought of Pacific Rim. Like if you think of Pacific Rim and tie it into Mechagodzilla, it makes sense. I mean, one of the later Toho movies, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, it wouldn't it would fit in perfectly as a double feature with Pacific Rim. So that's kind of what
How
Mechagodzilla's
cool would it
like.
have been if they actually did a crossover Pacific Rim and Godzilla, the
I'm
whole
sure
joining
that's
the
what he
whole
wants.
monster verse.
I'm sure that's what Del Toro wants, considering that Pacific Rim and the MonsterVerse are owned by the same studio. I'm just saying, the ball's in your court.
But dude, it would have been. I wish he would have came back to direct the sequel instead of having Stephen DeKnight doing it. He did a very poorly job of that sequel,
The,
Uprising.
the less said about Uprising, the better. But you kind of put the period at the end of the sentence of Godzilla versus Kong. This is a fun movie if you don't look too deep into it. I'm going to give it a high good rating only just because the movie is just fun. And when it doesn't like focus on Hollow Earth or any of the other nonsense, it's fun. Would you agree, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I give it like an 8 out of 10 for as a monster film. It's very well entertaining. I enjoyed see them duking it out. The visual effects, the action set pieces, they were amazing. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, at least they put a lot of effort into that. Aside from the human characters and the nonsense and a bunch of bullshit plot holes, this was a good, but it's not a great movie, but it was a good, entertaining monster film. That's all I can give it.
I agree. Well, what did you all think of Godzilla versus Kong? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to read what you have to say. And Matt, thank you so much for joining me for this to see out my road to Godzilla X Kong. The movie that we have been building up towards is soon at hand. And this series has been going on literally since New Year's Day. So
But dude, I'm still waiting for -1. I want the 4K Blu-ray for -1. Godzilla, come on, dude. That was
I
the
think we
superior fucking Godzilla we've ever seen. But you also have great human story and great entertainment monster film at the same time, and they were able to manage to do both. And that's when Hollywood needs to fucking start taking notes when it comes to that movie.
I'm honestly kind of shocked that there isn't one already, but I mean, I don't know, like the Godzilla rights and the Kong rights are just a mess. So maybe that has
Yeah, I think
something.
it might have something to do with the rights, and that's why they're taking a little bit longer for it to get released in the US. I've heard that we were supposed to get a release. It was supposed to originally come out in late 2024, but then they probably changed it and pushed it back to 2025.
Yeah, so like I said, it's just a nobody knows anything about that really. All we do know is that Godzilla minus one was excellent and it deserves some kind of 4K steelbook because Lord knows I will buy it. But But I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart if you checked out one or all of the videos in this series, because like I said, it started on New Year's Day, and here we are as of this recording, March 26th. So it has been over 3 months, nearly four. So this is a lot of work, but I want to thank everyone who collabed with me. Matt, thank you. Uh, Jake Collins also joined me for one. Pez Howell joined me for one. If I didn't bring up your name, I apologize, but just a blanket thank you. But on to Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. For Matt Wyatt, my name is Ryan Cam. We will see you in the next one. Y'all take care.